Hey, MBA hopefuls, and welcome to MBA Waves. You are live on the air. My name is Eric Lucrezia, and as always, I'm joined by my two fantastic co-hosts. How you doing? Bara, how are you?
I'm good. It's a beautiful day, and I'm really happy to see both of you and excited about this topic, luxury. Wow.
Yeah, likewise. Kritika, how you doing?
Oh, amazing. It's been just a beautiful round two, and I'm just having a lull before the interviews begin. So, extremely excited about luxury brand management, which is like the niche and something that everyone thinks is really glamorous, and it is glamorous. So, excited about this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned round two, Kritika, and so obviously talking about admissions rounds for MBA programs and luxury brand management is one of the, as you said, more niche MBA specializations. And there are a good handful of programs around the world that cater this, including where I used to work. So I have a good amount of knowledge about this from working at the school for many years, for getting to know the career services team, the different partnerships the school had with some of the top luxury brands, as well as a lot of the students coming in and coming out working for these top brands that many of you know and many of you love. So, that said, my clients that I deal with very often are interested in luxury brand management as a sector to work in. Either they already are in it or they want to pivot towards that. And I guess because knowing that I worked at one of the top schools in luxury brand management based in France and Europe, kind of where luxury comes from, I get a lot of requests for that. But what about you, Kritika? You're based in India, and from my experience, the Indian market is huge in luxury. There's a lot of people looking to work in that space. What about your clients?
So, I should say that, as India has always been a place where there was, I would say, a land of the plenty. So there is a huge demand for luxury goods here. And I would say that when I have worked with a lot of clients, and typically they will want to go to some of these very few schools that specialize. And I had to tell you that not a lot of schools offer luxury brand management as a specialization by itself. So I would say that when you look at the luxury brand market, it is huge. It's like about $1.5 billion, and I was doing some research about it. And to think of luxury, the first thing that comes to my mind is cars. A Ferrari or a Porsche or a Lamborghini or a Bentley. That's what I would say. And then second is obviously personal cosmetics. Like for example, when you look at somebody, you like, okay, what brand of glasses do you wear, or like what earrings are you wearing, and things like that. So I feel luxury brand management does have a huge scope for growth in the future.
Totally. And I want to correct myself because when I said luxury comes from Europe, in a large sense, that is true. But let's not forget, in India, in the subcontinent, in China, there was ancient empires where luxury also very much developed in other parts of the world as well. But I think when most of us think of luxury today in the modern sense, it often is European brands that are the most represented, and that often does have its roots in, like, with European kings, the opulence that royalty had, right? you know and sometimes I've often told this story. It's not everyone gets to be the king, but to work for the king is pretty good. If your object, like I think of like Fabergé eggs, like this guy who made these eggs for Tsar Nicola back in the early 20th century, or maybe even late 19th century. He created something that was completely unique. There were these giant ostrich eggs, right, lined with gold, encrusted with precious jewels, and the Tsar, King Nicola, fell in love with this object, and he was basically commissioned to do this every year for Easter for his daughter, and then for the other kids in the royal family, and he had free range to design it how he wanted to. The only rule was there had to be a surprise hidden inside, because it was like an Easter egg hunt kind of thing for kings. And at the end of the day, there was something like only like 75 in the world made, of which I think 60 something survive. And so these are incredibly rare, incredibly valuable, with a certain level of craftsmanship that is absolutely unique and you can't find anywhere. And all of these elements, and the heritage to the Russian royal family also, which also no longer exists, is what makes these objects so special. And that's just one example. But Bara, when you think of luxury, what does it make you think of? Whether products, services, what is
So,
luxury
I
for
mean,
you?
I think of when I think of luxury, I think of different places that I visited that have like they always have a street like in the Hamptons or like in Aspen or in New York. Like there's a certain area of town that has those luxury goods, whether it's handbags or fashion or sunglasses, watches, jewelry, makeup, cosmetics. But I think about them being clustered in a particular area, and then you go there, and then there's sticker shock, you know. But along
Oh
with the
yeah.
sticker shock, I have to say that in being a consumer, not so much of a lot of luxury brands, but I mean, it's a complete experience, right? Like the luxury brands always have or I think of restaurants, even though restaurants aren't specifically luxury, or experiences like travel experiences that are luxurious. It's always really about putting the customer first, it seems, and really making the customer feel really important. And, I've been to restaurants that are considered, top restaurants, and the food has been excellent, but it's not like off the hook, but the service is what
Mm.
makes that particular restaurant so amazing. And I think that when I think about luxury goods, I would imagine that there's just a marriage between product and experience of that product, and how the person feels when they have that product, right? Like what kind of, you were talking about the Fabergé eggs and the royalty. It's like some of it is like the status that comes along with having those particular items, especially if
Mm.
they are known. Like, when we were talking about this before, I was thinking about, like, I love Coach. I think Coach is considered a luxury brand, but I like Coach when it doesn't say Coach. I like things that don't
Ah.
have their stamp on it, so that automatically, but they're really high quality. Like that's sort of how I roll. But I
You're
don't.
bringing up a really interesting side topic of how luxury is experienced and appreciated in different regions of the world, and we're going to get into that, like why there's different regional
Mhm,
divisions. But what you're talking about is, yeah, definitely how more North American, European it tends to be compared to say the Middle East. It's very different.
right.
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned kind of like the high street, right? Like that famous street, like in a lot of cities, like LA, it's Rodeo Drive. Everyone knows Fifth Avenue in New York. In Paris, it's Faubourg Saint Honoré. Like there's that clustering of these top brands, because like they kind of play off each other. You have
Right.
Gucci there, you might go across the street and go to Chanel, that kind of thing.
Right.
Although you have a lot of brand loyalty, that's part of it too. People tend to be very intensely loyal to a luxury brand because they're putting so much money, and B, it's not just like the bag that they bought from the store, but it's the bag that the bag came in, and being seen with it. You talk about prestige, and it is like really recreating that sense of royalty, of being treated like a king or queen, and that's a lot of what luxury is. And so, breaking it down, because there's not just one sector of luxury. It's kind of like a bit of a false statement to say the luxury sector. I tend to think into segments within the sector or whatever. But like there's, fashion and accessories is one of the main things people think of. Some of the brands I already mentioned. Watches and jewelry is another big one. Cosmetics and fragrances, like fine fragrances, makeup, and so on. Wines and spirits, like you get to the real high level of wine, like a Cheval Blanc white wine or the champagne. Cars, Krithika already mentioned that. Yachts. Then there's art. A lot of people don't think about that. And if you think about it, the whole art world is very much linked to kind of like big money. I mean, most people can't afford a Picasso, right? And auction houses and that kind of thing, which can be anything from, Dali to Banksy. And then what Bara was talking about, like experiential kind of luxury, that's become more and more popular, especially with millennials. And younger, you get these kind of, especially where Bara is located, the kind of technocrat population of San Francisco. It's like very much about experiential luxury, travel, that kind of thing. You heard a couple of years ago, they were like the experience of like going up into space. I think it was Richard Branson, right? Was that with Virgin Space? I think it was called. I can't remember.
He was doing it.
Yeah. And so if I were to ask you guys, what's your favorite brand? What's your favorite luxury brand? You mentioned Coach. Is it Coach, Bara?
I like Coach. I love Coach. I also love DS and Durga, which I originally found them in Anthropologie, which I don't specifically think of a luxury brand per se,
Premium.
but it's premium. And yeah, I feel like there's perfumes that I really like. And then it's interesting because in the holistic crunchy world, there are not specifically luxury brands, but I feel like a lot of them want to emulate, the chocolates, the different kinds of chocolates and the different kinds of like
Mm-hmm.
mushroom turkey tail mushroom kind of health food, that it's not luxury, but I feel like they'll emulate, even like pet products will want to emulate luxury brands. But I'm a little bit at a loss of which, I mean, there's perfume brands that I love, but I don't know that I've got brand loyalty per se, but I love DS and Durga. So I think that my brand loyalty is with them.
Okay. Kritika?
All right, so I had to say that I have, soft corner for all these brands that are vegan friendly, more plant based, more sustainable. So Stella McCartney was first, and then I have my eye on a particular brand, and I hope that I will be able to probably buy that in New York. That more and more. One thing I've noticed about luxury probably now versus before is it's a statement for a lot of people. Like, for example, you want to say that I've arrived by probably showing the kind of brand that you're associated with, the kind of clothes that you're able to like afford, and of course they're so expensive, of course. But I would say the other thing is also it's more affordable to many people. Earlier, you would see a
Okay.
BMW rarely on Indian streets, but now you do manage to see many in within the short period of time, right? So, yeah, my favorites right now, and I want to say that sustainability and luxury brand management are going to go together. And
Mm.
about the experience that you mentioned, I would say cruises are also like one of the best ways to enjoy. And what I love about luxury brand management is people think it's immediately like cosmetics or personal brands that we're all used to, like fashion houses and things like it. But there are a lot of opportunities in all these other sectors as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I want to kind of get into what makes a luxury brand, and what schools are out there to focus on for those of you who are listening who are interested in luxury brand management, as well as how to be a good candidate. Um,
I will say one thing, Eric, that
yeah.
I had never, strangely, like I don't think I'd ever been in a Mercedes until like several years ago. And as soon as I got into the Mercedes, I was like, oh, 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 wow, wow. How can I
That's what
not,
all the
like
is
how can,
about. Yeah.
like this is nice. And so I think that as far as cars go, I can really understand how some of the luxury
Mm.
brand cars make a difference. And that was not even a customer service experience. That was just the experience of a Mercedes. We should
And
send this to
the quality, the overall the quality, the whole vibe that it gives, and it's so different,
Ah,
right? Also
totally.
the personalization that happens most of the times.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like, okay, there's also different segments within luxury. Like you mentioned how it's more and more accessible to a lot of people. And this is a challenge that luxury brands face, is right, how do they grow their business? How do they increase volume without diluting the brand, which is luxury and by definition exclusive, right? So it's a situation of have and have not. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and you get into these kind of crazy partnerships you might not expect, like between Chanel and H&M a bunch of years ago, or these what they call collaborations. But that's a whole other topic that I'm not going to go down. I want to talk about some of the things that go into what makes a brand a luxury. This is the kind of things you might want to address as a candidate, as an applicant for an MBA program in luxury brand management. The things you want to address, the things you want to point out your understanding. Because for sure, the majority of people who go for MBA programs in luxury brand management are doing so because they have a desire to pivot their career. They want to transform from something that they maybe made some money in, but they don't love it, right? They want to pivot into luxury. And so these are the kind of things you want to talk about to demonstrate that you have a deep knowledge about how luxury brands work. And so there's 5 main points, right? I'm going to go through them quickly and then come back and touch on them. They are quality, service, craftsmanship, heritage, and storytelling. And I'm going to use the example of this candle right here, because it was just my birthday, and a very dear friend of mine offered me this candle, and it's Citrodon. And this is the box it comes with. I mean, the box is like fancier than most candles I've had before. This little candle, which, just to give you an idea of the scale, to hold it next to my face, it's not that big. It's 220 euros. Now, this candle is a heritage brand. It goes back to the 1600s. This is like the first candle brand in France, I believe. Claims to be, I don't know if it really is, but claims to be the brand that is attached to the King's Court here in France. So Louis XIV. right? The Sun King. This was his candle maker. And let me tell you, the scent is gorgeous. I mean, I'm not selling this brand, but there's a real heritage behind this. That is this kind of identity. And connected to the heritage is the storytelling, how that brand managed to tell their story through the packaging, through, different, social media events like pop-ups and so on. Then there's the craftsmanship. Going back to that, it's an old brand. Like they probably have some kind of technique, is their secret sauce that makes their candles awesome, smell good, and burn forever. Like this thing is meant to last a long time. That also connects to quality, right? It's a quality product, like only the best, whatever, beeswax, I have no idea. There's a symbol of a beehive. I assume it's beeswax that goes into it. And lastly, service. That when you go into that store, especially if you're a regular customer, they're going to know you, and they probably even keep a profile on you as a client, right? They'll greet you by name. They might hand you a glass of champagne, maybe a little bit less for candles. But when you go to Cartier and you're buying jewels or Rolex and watches, or even like Dior, and you're buying like $10,000 dresses, like they know who you are. They greet you by name. You definitely have a glass or two of champagne, and it is a full experience. Even with the whole online luxury thing, that's like another interesting model that like Hermes, for example, Hermes has done a great job with that. So creating that experience to, again, recreate the experience of being a king or a queen is what's very much part of, and how you kind of show that off. It's important for a lot of people, or not. Like Bara pointed out, for some people, it's not as much of a thing in certain parts of the world. It's a very individual and personal choice as well. So these are some of the things you would definitely want to address in your approach, in your essay, in your interview, that you understand these kind of things.
I'm thinking about, there was a perfume I smelled on a friend or someplace, and I'm thinking about, you're talking about the candle scent, and the brand is Le Labo Sentinel 33. I don't know if you know this brand, but it's very distinctive. And I literally stopped in my tracks because it was so scrumptious. And then I found out that there's a store in San Francisco. You go in, name the perfume, and they put it on the perfume label, right? And of course I had to have it. But because I have sensitive skin, I didn't want to spend all that money before I knew that I could actually wear it and not break out. So it was just a whole thing, but I don't break out, and I really love it. So I mean, I love that.
What did that run you?
300.
What did that cost? Oh yeah.
300.
Yeah. You got to treat yourself sometimes.
So Eric, you're literally burning it away.
Burning the candle on both ends.
Burning money. But I mean, that's what it feels to many people. Like, if I just only have to get from a point A to point B, why would I want to like invest in a Bentley, right? Or a Porsche for that matter. But that said, who do you think works in the world of luxury?
Yeah. Well, just to respond to what you said, Krithika, and then I'll come back to your question. It's like, I have always been fascinated, especially since I worked at this school that has such a strong focus on luxury brand management. Like, what the psychology behind luxury? Like, what motivates somebody to spend 5,000 euros on a Mont Blanc pen instead of 5 cents on a Bic, when the Bic usually works just fine? But it's part of that whole experience, right? And if you're like, I don't know, a real estate agent, you're selling $1 million properties, you better not hand that client a basic Bic. Like, you basic Bic. No, but seriously, like, you need something with some weight to it, something that looks nice, something that, relates to the property that you just, or if you're like a high-end lawyer, or you're, whatever, anything like that, you're doing with like major contracts, you're selling a yacht, like that kind of stuff. Often things like Mont Blancs and watches, especially in the Chinese market, are huge in gifting. In Asian culture, Indian too, you can confirm this, Krithika, gifting is very, very important in Asian culture, particularly in East Asian culture. And, you buy a yacht, you might get a Rolex as a gift, like kind of thing. It's perfect kind of gift because it's kind of one size fits all, or you can adjust it. It's just impersonal enough. But there was a big crackdown on it. There was like something known as the Chinese watch crisis like 10 years ago, where big corruption crackdowns like really had an impact on the watch industry. Anyway, getting off on a tangent, but just to answer your question, coming back to your question, Krithika, what kinds of people who usually work in the world of luxury? I mean, I think there's something that is maybe the common thread, no matter what country we're talking about, no matter what segment of luxury, and that is these people are passionate. They have a real passion for the brand, just like the clients. And there's a difference between somebody who's a consumer or a client of luxury versus somebody who works in the industry. Usually it's a difference of bank account. But either way, there's usually a shared passion for that brand. Like that person who wants to deliver that incredibly, beautiful pen and perfect service. And like, if ever there's a problem with it, no question it's replaced or repaired or whatever it may be. But being part of that experience, like I said, not everyone can be the king, but it's pretty good to work for the king sometimes. So it's really about passion. I think that's one of the other things you want to really have come across when you're applying for an MBA in luxury brand management. If you don't have prior experience in luxury, that's usually not an issue. But you really want to demonstrate that you have a deep understanding of how brands work, despite not having direct experience, and that you have a real passion for it. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that, like, unless you're at the top of a luxury brand, like you're like pretty high level management, salaries are definitely not as strong as those who work in, say, finance or consulting. I mean, if you're looking for big bucks, you better think twice about, applying for an MBA in luxury brand management. That's a distinction we're making here today. Like in the title of the episode, a luxury MBA versus an MBA in luxury. It is not a luxury MBA. It's not like you're, jet setting around the world, sipping Tétanger in first class lounges around the world. It's an MBA in luxury brand management. It's training you to work in the world of luxury. And there's a real sensibility and a sensitivity about the kind of profiles that luxury brands are going to hire. It's not just like, oh, you have the expertise, but there's a real finesse, a way of communicating and being and presenting. That's part of it. And so while doing an MBA in luxury brand management, that may come with a bit of travel, because often you're going to visit some of the key luxury markets in the world, whether for working or for studying. But it's definitely a lot more blood, sweat, and tears than it is glitz and glam, to be honest. I dropped my Mont Blanc on the floor.
What I've noticed also in the past 15, 20 years, and I'm curious if this is part of luxury management, is what happens when you get a luxury brand going more mainstream, right? To like a Target or to some of these other, like they want to make, I think it's talking about what you were talking about before, Eric, when you were saying they want to appeal to a larger, they want to grow their reach, but they want to be exclusive. So when you have different brands then show up at Target or at, I don't know where else they would show up. But
Century 21, you might see them. Not really Target so much, but
no, there was like what is his name? Mizrahi, that designer, that high fashion designer that does really fun cool stuff. He had a whole brand that launched at Target.
Okay.
I don't know.
I have to check out that one.
But I wonder if that's also part of one's education. Like, how do you democratize it in a way? Maybe not. I mean, what are the key luxury markets in the world right now? I mean, you sort of touched upon that, but what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, so the first part of what you were saying, you're talking about democratizing luxury, and it's a bit of an oxymoron. Like, it's like, well,
right.
if everyone can access it, how is it luxury anymore? It's like that. It is kind of defined by its exclusivity, which is almost not very nice, I guess. But it's sort of the point. I mean, like, imagine like every single person in a kingdom was the king. Just doesn't work. So it is based on that. But again, if a company wants to grow in volume, there's some creative solutions they've come up with, like these kind of partnerships where like you could go, I mean, this was a few years ago. It was like 5-6 years ago. You can go to an H&M and there were like Chanel products there, but they were like this weird collaboration where it would be a Chanel but H&M thing, and those things that you could find in H&M would never be in a Chanel store. That's just how they do it, and it's a way to reach a whole nother market without diluting your brand, in theory. And I think they pulled it off pretty well.
I actually have to admit, I just remembered a luxury brand that I love, which is Fluvog shoes.
Okay,
you're familiar with Fluvog? And they're just super funky. When we're in New York, I'll show you some Fluvogs if I bring them. But they're just really fun and funky, almost Cirque du Soleil, really, and very, very high end. But their solution was to create a marketplace of people who have had Fluvogs selling to other people who want Fluvogs at a reduced rate because they're used, but they're still in the hundreds, right? So that's probably a
I don't want to go down this road too much, but there's like another whole thing about like what do you do with the unsold stock from a given collection? Like, there was a lot of fear about that ending up like in the black market. There's a whole like a huge division of almost every luxury brand is dealing with the copies, the fakes, and how to like squash them. Like what websites are you know what I mean? Chinatown in New York, like, it's a big deal. And a lot of companies were burning their stock. And I'm not sure if it was just France or all of the European Union, but banned that a few years ago. And so they had to come up with some creative solutions. They would do employee discount days. It would be like, you can get up to like, 90% off on stuff. And it was employees, friends and family only kind of thing. They do these events kind of like that. Or they would sell them to up and coming designers to practice with. So like they, a dress, like a Dior dress, and they can like cut it up and practice making, new luxury products. Same with leather goods too. But it's bad for the planet because you're burning like leather and all sorts of stuff. As well as like there's people who need clothes, and this is ridiculous that we're burning clothes that are perfectly good. But yeah, that's why the EU or France, or forget which one, like intervene of like, you can't do that anymore. But you also asked about which are the key luxury markets in the world. As I mentioned, during an MBA in luxury brand management, you will definitely learn about this, if not physically go there. In the times post-COVID, I know some schools have pivoted away from long-haul travel to try to be more eco-friendly, and also because of cost and so on. But to your point, most people working in luxury tend to be concentrated in very specific markets. And while there are often boutiques in most major cities, Bara, like you mentioned before, like the Rodeos and the Fifth Avenues, the corporate offices, they tend to be usually concentrated in just a few cities for luxury brands, which are usually closely connected to the brand's origins, or they're like regional hubs. So to start things off, by far, most of the luxury brands that we know are coming from France or Italy. So Paris and Milano are definitely the major commercial hubs where you'll see most of the corporate offices for a lot of these brands. And if you look at the largest luxury conglomerates like LVMH, right? That's Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy. So LVMH is the biggest one in the world, like by far. They have like a portfolio of like 50 or 60 luxury brands. It's just mind-boggling how many are in this one group, and this one guy who is like the richest or second richest man of France owns this group. It's crazy. But anyway, LVMH, Kering, and Richemont, they're all French. Even Kering, which used to be the Gucci group, which obviously a very well-established Italian luxury house, is now also owned by the French. And the other two big players in what I call the L5, right? The luxury big five groups are also Estee Lauder, which is American, you probably know, mostly cosmetics, but they have other brands in their portfolio, and Luxottica, which is Italian. And beyond that, the other hubs besides Paris and Milan, London, New York, Dubai, and Hong Kong are the major hubs. And then you kind of have Miami too, because most of the luxury brands, their Latin American operation is based out of Miami. It's just easier. It's closer to Europe. It's easier to run business out of Florida. But there's also growing markets like in India. We spoke about that too. And a lot more and more people that do MBAs in luxury come back to India because they obviously speak the local languages. They know the culture, and it's easier. And it's a growing market. Like I see India following the path of China in terms of like more and more growing economy. The population is about to overcome that of China. So there's a lot more happening in India these days as well. So
Yeah, and I have to mention one thing in terms of, you mentioned about the markets. It's also about the demographics. So earlier it was only the millennials or even like, the other generations who were able to afford it. But for example, Louis Vuitton had like this campaign with Nike, and it was targeted at teenagers. So they want to like capture different markets and not just like people who can afford their costly items, but they also want to look at Gen Z and others. And given that India and China have huge Gen Z populations, another reason why there'll be a lot more opportunities here. And
Yeah.
we've seen like local schools also start thinking more about these aspects too.
Part of that is also trying to develop a brand loyalty early on, right? If you can hook people in their teen years or at university, whether it's like soft drinks. Like I remember when I was at college, at university, Coca-Cola came out with Dasani, which is this like offshoot of Coke, as like this water brand, and they were giving him bottles away free at all the parties and the concerts and whatever events. And then we just all were reaching for Dasani for years. Like it's just like something about like during those formative years, it creates that brand loyalty even before they can afford it. But there's a desire for it, and that's part of it too. That unattainableness is what creates that desire, especially for luxury brands. So yeah, I don't know that most of the teenagers they target in that marketing Krithika that you mentioned actually were clients, but I think it's an investment in future clients.
I've got a question actually for both of you. Do you find that the applicants who are specifically going into luxury brands, how would they present themselves in a particular way in order to be more highly considered? Or what would it be about I would imagine it shows up in their essays more than anywhere else, but are there some things that you recommend to your clients, people who are interested in going to luxury brands? Or are they just like every other business school student going into finance or assembly, like auction? I don't like all the different mergers and finance, whatever. What is it that makes them shine for the programs?
Krithika, do you want to take it first, or you want me to go? Or
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. So like I said, largely the majority of people that I've seen applying for the MBA in luxury do not have direct professional experience in luxury, but there's always something. There's always some kind of story, some kind of hook. Like, I don't know, like it'll be like, my grandfather was a dress designer when he moved over from Italy or something to the US or something like that. Or like, oh, my auntie used to collect, precious gems, or often family, but not always, it could be on their own. They developed a certain passion for it, but you can just see that spark when, yes, as you said, the essays is usually one of the first things we see in their application. If they get shortlisted for an interview, then you really can see it. But there's some kind of spark. Like I said, there's two big things, like demonstrating a deep understanding of how the luxury brands work, even if you haven't ever worked there, and a real passion for it. Yeah, that's it. But there's a difference. And like I said, also that's why the interview is so important for people who want to work in luxury, because there's a certain finesse that you need to have, for better or for worse. Luxury brands are looking for not looking for people who are very rough around the edges. Let's put it that way. So it's part of it.
It sounds like a very personal story too. Like it sounds like the kind of exclusivity that you're talking about luxury provide for its customers, that in some ways that is mirrored in the application and the way that someone is going to present themselves. Like there's just a very unique, special, personal story that you gave about, oh, my uncle, was a dressmaker or tailor.
Heritage. Yeah, and like
that.
It is. I mean, when you're applying for an MBA, whatever, if it's a STEM MBA, if it's a more classic, if you want to go into finance, I mean, you are essentially marketing yourself for this school. And there's a sort of speed dating. It's a dance. We've got a whole catalog of metaphors that we've talked about on this show. But it is very much that when it comes to something so niche as this, that you want to those same points about like quality, service, craftsmanship, storytelling, heritage. Like, if any of those things apply to you, you want to show that. You want to showcase that in your CV or resume, certainly in your essays and your interview later on. And as always, you want to do your research about the MBA program. But if you can somehow connect with people who are not only alumni, but who are alumni working in luxury brands. Other things I've said, like, if you like to write, like something you can do is start a blog. Like if you're truly passionate about luxury, it'll express itself. This passion will express itself in some way. It doesn't mean you got to run out and buy like 10 Chanel suits. Like, who can afford that? But and by the way, just to put it out there, when you're going for the interview, it is not expected that you're going to wear a $10,000 or euro suit by any means, but you definitely want to look the part. You want to look sharp. You want to show that you know how to dress, that you have a touch of class, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanted to add here a story that I had, from one of my clients who was looking at luxury brand management.
uh-huh.
Interestingly, when you look at all the places that you mentioned, you do have a school there. Like you have SDA Bocconi, and then you have like ESSEC, of course, in France. And of course, France has like so many of those programs offering. And of course, like when you look at New York, you have NYU Stern having this fashion and luxury management program. What people think about, as I said, you do have other functions. So you would have somebody doing a merchandising, you would have somebody doing a business development and operations, and of course, brand management. So I would say that one thing that differentiated this candidate from others was. Like having a little bit of, they had some prior experience in marketing, and they wanted to go and like handle like brand marketing for like LMBH and so on and so forth.
Mm,
And that was the kind of story. And then I also have another person who had absolutely no correlation or anything, no relation rather, to luxury brand management, but they wanted to do it for the reason that they really love the brand. So they were
mm.
able to like pick one or two
Passion.
brands here again, and then show that that's the thing that moved them. But again, like what stands out, I would say, are transferable skills, which show that, hey, look, I'm going in for a particular function in this sector. So I
Mm,
think like I can like manage it, and I can use the MBA in order to pivot without
mhm,
having to do something drastically different, or
mhm.
probably work in some other field and then move.
Yeah, it's not that big of a leap. Like somebody who's working in retail, like maybe you're working at, H&M, Walmart, or even Abercrombie. The Abercrombie is like I would call a premium brand. Expensive, but it's not luxury. Okay, so you already understand how retail works. You're working with clothing, or you're working with accessories, hats, shoes, whatever. And now you want to, and maybe you had a marketing function or a product management function or product development function. And now you want to pivot into something more luxury. That's where you get that sensibility and the network in luxury, by the way, because it really is all about that. I mean, if you have your sights set on as like a C-suite position at a brand like Cartier or Gucci or Maserati, I mean, one of these schools is where you want to go because they have the most developed network. There's also a certain trust extended by these luxury brands that these schools, these handful of schools, are producing students, graduates that have the sensibility and sensitivity of working in these brands. Yeah. I actually had somebody who was from California, from Bakersfield, California, who was a chemistry major in college, worked in oil and gas, and applied her chemistry knowledge to a pivot working in the fragrance industry. She, besides the fact she was in a typically a masculine, B, rough around the edges kind of industry, like oil and gas engineer, in kind of like the stinky desert of Death Valley, she did have a real sense of style and a real finesse and could present herself well. So it was this combination of like the chemistry knowledge, her interest in fragrances and cosmetics, which are basically chemistry on your face, and the passion for these kind of brands. And she tied it all together, and she was a great candidate. And she actually ended up starting her own company afterwards. It's another thing, like on luxury startups, like really like small grassroots, often sustainable, who want to push the needle towards a more sustainable luxury industry, which is a question that's been asked for a long time now. Is sustainable luxury even possible? Is it an oxymoron? Is it, or how can we get there? Like, how can we be luxurious and sustainable at the same time? It's about how we source products, raw materials, how we're treating local communities, are we paying people equitable wages, are we all of these important things that we like to talk about, but applying them to this very niche luxury world where it can be hard to do that. Extra challenges, but more and more, there's resources on that. If anyone is interested in this topic of luxury, Business of Fashion is a great resource. BOF, I think .com is their site. Started out as a small blog. Now it's like one of the kind of gold standards in like news and information about luxury brands. There's another one called eLux Magazine, which is the world's first online sustainable luxury magazine. Very interesting as well. So you have like great ideas, insights. You can be inspired by other people's stories. And if you are interested in pivoting into luxury, you should absolutely be reading these things. You should be up to date on what major brands or small startups are doing. have some kind of vision for yourself. Like, what function do you want to have? Why are you doing this? It should be clear. As with any MBA application, like, you should be as clear as possible what your goals are and be able to articulate that. But there's just another layer of nuance in this world of luxury. I think it's super interesting. I am not by any means a client in luxury, but like I said, I am fascinated by the psychology of how it works, and still got my big.
I have to tell you, Eric, the last piece of advice that you gave is going to work for any niche, whether it's a tech MBA or if you want to do like a more finance focused MBA or sustainability, which is getting more and more popular. You would want to definitely follow the trends in the industry and show that you know what it takes to get to the role that you want. And yeah, that is something I think should be one of the major takeaways for anybody because when it comes to specialization, the understanding is that you are already starting off from somewhere, and it's not like a ground zero. Like that's kind of the understanding. So you have some kind of skills to rely on, and then move to the next level using the MBA, of course. So I really like the.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. And you already mentioned, Krithika, some of the major players in graduate management education in the luxury space. Obviously, like, connected to major luxury hubs like Paris, Milan, and New York. So the first ever MBA in luxury brand management was started, I think it was 1995, was ESSEC Business School, and since then there's been others. Like, Bocconi is quite strong in luxury. HEC has some specializations in luxury. There's also some besides MBA, there's also specialized masters and master's programs in general. Masters, like, pre-experienced masters, incredibly strong in luxury. You see these what are called chairs, where you're in a master's program and you have this kind of concentration you have to get selected for. They're often in partnership with major companies like L'Oreal or Louis Vuitton. And at the executive level, executive masters, is a program called Emilux, which you see that exists at Bocconi, that exists also at ESSEC. NYU launched an MBA in luxury brand management. It's very similar to the European one-year model. About 6 years ago, when it launched, it was not part of Stern, but I think I heard they might have been absorbed into the Stern School of Business. Columbia also has an MBA in luxury brand management. And there's also a lesser known school in Monaco, by the way. So, like, kind of like straddling Italy and France, the International University of Monaco. But, if you're looking for what schools are out there, what are the players you want to be looking at? If you're interested in a career pivot into luxury, look at some of the rankings that focus on that. Like, Best Masters, I think it's best-masters.com. They do a specialized ranking in luxury. You're not going to see this in Financial Times because it's too niche. Like, you can't, you're not going to have a full-on ranking like you have with the FT or the Economist or US News and World Report for things like luxury or in hospitality management or in sports management. Some of these niches are a little bit too niche. So you have to look at some of these smaller rankings like Best Masters to have an idea of, like, okay, what's the landscape about? Like, what are the major players I want to be focusing on? And then you want to deep dive and see what schools, first of all, what is their culture? Does it resonate with you? It's all about fit. We talk about this a lot on MBA Waves. And what specific segments in luxury do you want to focus on? And, what schools are connected to those? What would have the most examples of alumni that have successfully found employment, right? Gainfully employed, who are indeed working in their dream industry. That's what it's all about, making that dream happen.
I feel like sashaying over to a luxury goods store right now.
Maybe we should meet in LA and have breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell you, like, one thing which has always fascinated me about luxury is even the secondhand goods, like Rolex, used Rolex and things like that is chill. And of course, sneakers, some of the sneakers, not necessarily secondhand, but like, somebody would have like bought it and then kept it and then, they sell it at a higher price and things like that. It's just so fascinating. And
so the resale world, I mean, watches is a great example. Watches and depends again, right? They generally keep their value after a certain point. If they're kept in good condition, they can increase in value because of the rarity of such an older timepiece. Think of pocket watches, especially. Also, getting to things like furniture. I mean, as one of the grads from the program I worked at, like he went on to start a company. It was like custom luxury furniture is what the business he started up. But yeah, resale, I mean, for like lady shoes, like Manolo Blahniks, that kind of stuff, like, yeah, those have incredible resale value.
Like the Fluvogs I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
Even dogs, right? Like
Louboutin.
even dogs, right? Like even like
Oh yeah,
there's
also.
yeah, like it's amazing when there's like a designer dog at the shelter, you know, and like there's some sort of it's really interesting and bizarre that
living
that's
luxury.
really
Living luxury. Also, like wearables is like a thing, you know, since like the tech boom, luxury, like like an iWatch is that what it's called? Apple Watch, sorry. Apple Watch is an example. Apple is considered luxury in the communication space. And so yeah, that watch, I mean, it's a wearable thing, but things like, you know, I got my brother for Christmas one year. It was like we go snowboarding together, or we used to a lot. And I got him like a helmet that had like plug-in features so he can like connect it to his iPhone or his iPad, or I think it was an iPod back in the day. And he had a jacket with like buttons on the sleeve. So like wearable tech kind of stuff. It was definitely more the premium space. I could not afford luxury, but it was pretty cool to have like the helmet with the earphones built in, so he would, you know, actually wear it. And there's a lot more stuff too, like that, like, you know, Fitbits and everything thereafter.
So I had to say, one thing is so common between somebody wanting to do an MBA and also like somebody wanting to get into luxury brand management. It's all aspirations.
Absolutely. So what else? Yeah, I mean, for me, just to kind of like finish off, because we're coming up on the hour, like if you want to be a good candidate for a program in luxury, you have to really go deep on the research. You want to like, I'll say the same words again. You want to really demonstrate that passion that you have. If there's especially a particular brand or two brands that really resonates with you, talk about that and why. And, you know, that may be the thing you want to talk about in your essay. Tell a good story. You know, you're hoping to work in an industry where you're trying to convince people to spend $5,000 on this thing, for example. You better be good at that. So the first job is to sell yourself. You know, maybe your resume looks a little bit more artistic than a resume you would see for someone in finance or accounting. You know, be a little bit of creativity, especially if you're looking in the product design. You know, if you want to be like overseeing like the design of new Christian Louboutin shoes, which by the way are pieces of art, right? Like I went, it was just before COVID, like weeks before COVID. So it was like February 2020. There was a Christian Louboutin exhibit, and like shoes since he started in like, I would say the 60s, 50s maybe. I mean, oh my God, they're like classic timepieces that like belong in museums. And and they go for like many, many, many thousands, if not more. Yeah, luxury is in a way art. And so if you want to be overseeing design teams, like, first of all, you're going to be in Paris or Milan, probably. Not in like the corporate offices in like Hong Kong or whatever, but you know, demonstrating your creative eye, yeah, that kind of thing too. Think about the role you want to focus on, the function that you want to have, and that needs to come through in the story that you tell about yourself. Yeah.
super interesting stuff. I learned a lot today.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Krithika?
No, I would say that's like a lot of information. And given that there are only a handful of schools out there, my only advice is like start early. Don't keep waiting for the very last moment, because one thing about these programs, especially the specializations out there, the tech MBAs, the luxury brand management programs, etc., is that there are limited seats. So if you're really serious about it, one way to show your commitment would be to apply early.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, seats are definitely limited, and that's limited by the industry. There's a limited number of luxury brands, limited number of positions in corporate, because you know, most people, I assume, are not doing an MBA to work in retail, to work in the boutique. Although that sometimes is a stepping stone. I'm going to be very honest right now. If you're pivoting into luxury for the very first time, you might spend the first year or so like managing a store, and before you get into corporate. So, you know, there's stepping stones. That's just the reality of the career path sometimes, especially if you're making a major transformation. But yeah, starting early, making connections as always, demonstrating your interest, your passion, your seriousness, and your knowledge. So I think with that, we're gonna end it off, guys. It was a pleasure as always talking with you, and we'll see you next week on MBA Waves. Same time, same place, and check out next week's episode at mbawaves.com. Bye.
Bye.